Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020-2021 Imprint Margaret Root Brown Reading Series. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. We are very happy tonight to be in the Imprint virtual studio with the wonderful authors Julia Alvarez and Sigrid Nunez, who will read from and talk about their poignant new novels, Afterlife and What Are You Going Through? And then they'll join in a conversation with another wonderful writer, Houston writer Jasminne Mendez. We owe great thanks to Julia and Sigrid for being with us tonight, as well as their publishers, Algonquin and Riverhead, and Jasminne, our interviewer. My name is Rich Levy. I'm Executive Director of Inprint, and we are delighted you're with us for this 40th anniversary season, a testament to the people of Houston and the power of the written word. Since 1980, this series, which we work hard to ensure is accessible to everyone, has presented nearly 400 great writers from 36 countries, winners of 10 Nobel Prizes, 63 Pulitzer Prizes, 56 National Book Awards, 51 National Book Critics Circle Awards, 15 Booker Prizes, as well as 19 U.S. Poets Laureate. Thank you for making it all possible. Now, 2 weeks from today, on Monday, October 26th, we are honored to present novelist Britt Bennett, author of The Vanishing Half, in conversation with ABC Channel 13 news anchor Melanie Lawson, a special event in partnership with the Houston Museum of African American Culture. See our website for free tickets. And then we're back to this extraordinary series with evenings in November featuring Nick Hornby and Margaret Atwood, in February with Lily King and Chang Rui Lee, and in April with Viet Thanh Nguyen and our old friend Jericho Brown. Tickets and details about all of this and more are at imprinthouston.org. Yesterday, I was going to say, in addition to this reading series, we also offer Cool Brains, a free series that presents some of the nation's most beloved middle grade writers with book giveaways and bus scholarships when we're live and more. Yesterday, we presented Lois Lowry with her new book, answering video questions from kids. And in December, Chris Grabenstein will join us with his new book. The Imprint Book Club discusses Ya Jesse's Transcendent Kingdom on October 18th. And Marilyn Robinson's Jack on November 15th via Zoom. We offer free workshops across the city for senior citizens, school teachers, healthcare providers, veterans, the incarcerated, when we can, and others, some of which are on Zoom. We present Spanish and bilingual readings at Imprint House, now on Zoom, and the Imprint Poetry Buskers typically write poems at events all over town by request in English and Spanish on typewriters, and now occasionally online. Check out Inkwell, our podcast with Jasminne Mendez and her husband, Lupe Mendez, of Tintero Projects. This highlights Latinx writers. And then there's the Imprint Archive of Readings, which houses recordings of more than 100 past events. We also support some of the nation's top emerging writers at the UH Creative Writing Program and undergraduate writers at Rice University. All of this and more at imprinthouston.org. The Inprint Margaret Root Brown Reading Series is made possible by the invaluable support of the Brown Foundation, named for one of its founders, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Inprint receives generous support from the Jerry C. Deering Foundation, Houston Endowment, and the City of Houston through the Houston Arts Alliance, as well as the Texas Commission on the Arts. The way this will work tonight is that for about 7 to 10 minutes each, Julia and Sigrid will talk about and read from Afterlife and What Are You Going Through, and then they will join Jasminne for a conversation. Before I introduce our first author, I want to urge you to buy copies of these two wonderful novels at brazosbookstore.com. Brazos, Houston's beloved indie bookseller and our partner in this series since 1980, is offering a 10% discount on Afterlife and What Are You Going Through. The discount code of all things is Inprint, which you enter at checkout. Julia Alvarez is the Dominican-American author of 6 renowned novels, including In the Time of the Butterflies, with more than 1 million copies in print, Yo, for which she came here many moons ago, and How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents, her acclaimed debut. She is with us tonight with her new novel, Afterlife, which Jonathan Santlofer calls ravishing and heartfelt. Afterlife explores the complexities of familial devotion and tragedy against a backdrop of a world in crisis, and the ways in which we struggle to maintain hope, faith, compassion, and love. This is Julia Alvarez at her best and most personal. I think Luis Alberto Urrea puts it perfectly about Afterlife. He writes in the New York Times, "This is the exact novel we need in this fraught era, a powerful testament of witness and humanity, written with audacity and authority." Julia Alvarez is also the author of 3 works of nonfiction, 3 poetry collections, 11 books for children and young adults. Her awards include the Pura Belpré and Americas Award for Young Readers, the Hispanic Heritage Award, and in 2013, the National Medal of Arts from President Obama in recognition of her extraordinary storytelling. She is also co-founder and director of the Scheherazade Project, which later I hope she'll tell us more about. She has taught and mentored writers across the US and until 2016 was writer in residence at Middlebury College. Hello, Julia.
Hello.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for being with us tonight. I see a butterfly over your shoulder.
Yes, you do. I tried to decorate my study so that I can be in the space for all of you. And anyhow, thank you for that introduction. And I apologize beforehand for any technical problems. As I was explaining, I live on a dirt road in rural Vermont, and we don't even have cable here. So
no, this will be wonderful.
The best we can with.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I want to thank Imprint Houston and the Margaret Root Brown Reading Series for hosting us. And thank you to Jasminne Mendez, fellow Quisqueyana and part of our Border of Lights collective for being our mistress of ceremonies. And Sigrid Nunez, it's an honor to be back together with you. You might not remember, but we started way back at Breadloaf, and I would always go to your readings because I love your work. So I'm going to be reading a passage from Afterlife. We were asked to introduce the passage, introduce the book, a little bit about the impetus for the book. And this is a novel that, of course, I wrote pre the times we're living in now of the pandemic. But even back years ago, I would say for the last 10 years, but especially for the last 4, I felt like we were living in what I termed in my head as elegiac times, times when we're confronting so many losses, due to some of them to climate change, species going extinct, coastal towns going underwater, storms and flooding. And in the public sphere, the loss of civility and increasing gun violence, violence against communities of color, divisiveness, draconian immigration laws. It just went on and on. And the other thing is, more personally, I felt like I was living in a time of so many deaths, because I come from an extended Latina familia, which is great when you're growing up, so many aunts, uncles, cousins. But what happens is that when the time comes for a generation to die, you don't just lose one or two people, but you lose a whole phalanx of people, just globs of people. It felt like every month there was a call from the DR, Dominican Republic, where my family is from, telling me about one more beloved figure that was gone. So, I just felt like it was elegiac times that I was living in. And so the question, the perplexity, the thing I pondered in my heart in writing this novel is, how do we live with all these losses? How do we live in a broken world and not lose faith in each other and ourselves? And that was sort of the impetus. And then, of course, the novel comes out and we're going through times that are very much a sort of upping the ante of those very concerns. So it sort of sounds a little grim, but I do want to say that I think of it as a contemporary book of Job with a sense of humor. And how can it not have a sense of humor when the protagonist is an older Latina woman with what she calls a Greek Dominican chorus of sisters? So I want some lightness and sweetness in it too. But, I want to face what's before us and still come through with the possibility of grace and as I said, sweetness and light and hope. Because in the end, I think it's that open-heartedness that's going to get us through. So I'll read from the very beginning of the novel, the prologue, that's called Broken English. And you don't really need to know much except that my protagonist is Antonia, on the eve of her retirement from a long career teaching literature. And she's on her way to meet her husband, Sam, for a celebration dinner. Broken English. She is to meet him, a place they often choose for special occasions, to celebrate her retirement from the college, a favorite restaurant, and the new life awaiting her. A half-hour drive from their home, a mountain town, 20 if she speeds in the 30-mile zone. Tonight, it makes more sense, a midway point, to arrive separately, as she will be driving down from her doctor's appointment. She gets there first, as he will be driving from home. He should have been there before her. She starts calling his cell. After waiting 10, 20 minutes, he doesn't answer. Irritation turns to worry. No surprise. He always leaves it behind in his work jeans pocket. The hospital, 911, the police. Have you seen him? Or turns off the sound of the movies and then forgets to turn it back on. Can you please help me find him? Even now, months later, about 6 feet, thinning hair, a boy's blue eyes, when she knows good and well, dusk deepening. How he had been driving up the mountain. He feels a stab of pain, already thinking of what he might order, coming from his left side, but radiating out, wondering about her state of mind. The special, if it is special, if she would be excited or terrified, or his default favorite, salmon with lemon dill sauce, like a sword piercing his left side. Substituting mashed potatoes for the fries, they're very good about substitutions. Though how would he know what it feels like to have a sword piercing his left side? Because of his medical training, understanding what is happening, not wanting to cause more harm, pronounced dead on arrival. He forgets to charge it and it runs out of juice. Even now, 3 months shy of a year later, pulling his car off the road, rolling gently to a stop, when she knows exactly what happened. A ditch that might as well be his grave. Discovered by a passing cyclist, rushed to the ER. Why he was late. A ruptured aortic aneurysm, as he is to be cremated and therefore have no grave per se. Neither he nor she could have foreseen. Even now, a boy's blue eyes, and cannot comprehend how someone she loved, she keeps running and rerunning that night in her head. Can you please help me find him? Can be nothing but dust, unread emails, fragments, unpaid bills, memories, broken glass, dented bumper. A new life awaiting her, both terrified and excited. How can it be? Can you help me find him? Tall with thinning hair, a new life awaiting her. Can you help me find him? A mystery she cannot by any means solve. Nevertheless, she keeps asking, where are you? As this is the only way she knows. Can you help me find him? How to create an afterlife for him. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you. It's such a powerful opening. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure now to introduce Sigrid Nunez, the critically acclaimed author of 7 novels, including The Friend, which won the 2018 National Book Award, A Feather on the Breath of God, and Salvation City, a kind of prescient novel in which a 13-year-old boy is orphaned in a global flu pandemic and sent to live with an evangelical pastor and his wife. She is also the author of Sempre Susan, a memoir of Susan Sontag. Tonight, she is with us with her new novel, What Are You Going Through? I love what Merv Emre says in The New Yorker. She writes, I was dazed by the novel's grace, its creation of a narrative consciousness that, by emptying and extending itself to others, ensured that its vitality would never dwindle, never dim. She calls the book radiant with meaning. The title of this new novel is taken from an essay by Simone Weil, in which she writes, the capacity to give one's attention to a sufferer is a very rare and difficult thing. The love of our neighbor in all its fullness simply means being able to say to him, what are you going through? And I agree with the NPR review that says the marvel of this novel is that it encompasses so much sadness, yet is not grim. The work of Sigrid Nunez has been translated into more than 20 languages, and her awards include a Whiting Award, the Rome Prize in Literature, and 4 Pushkar Prizes. She has taught at Columbia, Princeton, the New School, and currently resides in New York City, the place of her birth. Hello, Sigrid.
Hello.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of Inprint, and I'm honored and delighted to be reading with Julia and to be chatting with Jasmine. So this question about where the book began or the idea came from, as Julia said, it's always hard to say. However, with this book, What Are You Going Through? It was really after I'd finished it that I realized that it came out of The Friend, not that it's a sequel, but it's almost as if these 2 books were in conversation with each other, and they have very similar concerns about friendship and grief and losing somebody. So in the novel, the narrator has agreed to go away with an old friend of hers, a woman who has received a diagnosis of terminal cancer, and needs someone to be with her while she takes care of last things. And this friend has brought with her euthanasia drugs that she's planning to take because she wants to be in control of her own death. And she's been unable to concentrate in order to read, so she asks the narrator to read to her. So that's something they've been doing. And they've just finished reading a mystery novel together, and now they're trying to decide what to read next. I had some recently published novels on my Kindle, but my friend wasn't interested in listening to any of them. She didn't like what she called the vandalizing streak in contemporary fiction writers. She quoted John Cheever on the difference between a fascinated horror of life and a vision of life. Nowadays, it seems to be mostly fascinated horror, she said, either that or totally unconvincing platitudinous sentiment. All these books about the horribleness of modern life, she said, a lot of them brilliant. I know, you don't have to tell me. But I don't want to read any more about narcissism and alienation and the futility of relationships between the sexes. I don't want to read any more about human, in particular, madness. Whatever happened to Faulkner's idea that a writer's job was to lift people up? How Faulkner chastised the young writer of his day. He writes as though he stood among and watched the end of man. He writes not of the heart, but of the glands. It was out of fear that the writer wrote this way, Faulkner said, the fear he shared with every other person on earth, the fear of being blown up. But it was the writer's duty to rise above such fear, Faulkner said. Valor was what Faulkner was calling for that day in Stockholm in 1950, and then a return to the old universal truths, love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice, absent which, Faulkner warned, your story will last but a day. Fine words, really fine words, but of all the ways of looking at a writer today, as a knight in shining armor strikes me as probably the most far-fetched. Another time, my friend said to me, you'd think it would be easier to leave life if you could convince yourself that everything was horrible and the future was totally bleak. But I can't bear to think that I'll be gone and the world won't go on, infinitely rich, infinitely beautiful. Take that away and there's no consolation. I myself, as I told my friend now, have always been haunted by a scene from an old movie I once saw, based on the lives of the Bronte family. One of the sisters who knows she's dying says that because she's always been afraid of life, she doesn't so much mind leaving it. But then on a day like this, she says, when the world is so beautiful, she is sitting somewhere outdoors, I recall, no doubt somewhere in the moors. She confesses that she wouldn't mind living just a little longer. I'd been channel surfing, and that was the only scene I watched. It was long ago. I could be remembering it wrong, but this was how it always came back to me, and it came back to me a lot. Meanwhile, I was scanning a large bookcase in the living room. How about this, I said, pulling a heavy book from the bottom shelf, The World's Best Folk and Fairy Tales. Gods and heroes, princes and peasants, giants and little people, witches, tricksters, and animals, animals, animals. This would be our reading from now on. She could not get enough of it. Much has been said about mystery stories being like fairy tales and popular for some of the same reasons. Instead of ogres, serial killers. And though they might not be pure of heart, no princes or Galahads or saints, the detectives are still heroes, righteous, if not always noble avengers. All is simplified, characters, types, moral code clear, where guilt or innocence lie plain. Plenty of cruelty, violence, and gore, but in the end, the evil are vanquished, and even if the good don't live happily ever after, there is closure. the kind of closure that mostly eludes people in real life. Except that fairy tales are beautiful, my friend said. Fairy tales are sublime, and mysteries are not. Another difference, unlike mysteries, fairy tales are not escapist, even if they too simplify and conform to familiar formulas. The truths in fairy tales always run deep. That is why children love them. Who knows better than a child what it's like to be at the mercy of hidden and arbitrary forces, and that anything can happen no matter how strange, either for good or for ill? Fairy tales are real. They are more mysterious than any mystery novel. That is why, unlike mystery novels meant to entertain then be forgotten, fairy tales are classics. They are of the heart, not of the glands. I like that we owe fairy tales to old women. When the idea came to people to collect those of a given region, they began by taking down the tales told by its crones. What's your favorite fairy tale? My friend wanted to know. Anyone that has swans in it, I said. I remember when I first read The Six Swans, how I wanted to be the brother whose magic shirt his sister doesn't have time to finish. So when he's turned back into a human being, he still has one wing. You wanted to be the freak. Well, I didn't think of it that way. Maybe just the different one, I said. The one who gets to keep part of his swan being. That appealed to me. We had taken to sitting side by side on the sofa when we were together in the living room, semi-recumbent, with our legs stretched out and our feet up on the coffee table. More than once while I was reading, she fell asleep. I would stop reading and keep very still, alternately soothed and tormented by the sound of her breathing. I would remember the vigil at my father's hospital bedside when his breathing had become so labored that it was as if there was some malfunctioning machine in the room, and the shock of it ceasing, like that, as if the machine had been switched off, and the silence that followed, louder than his breathing had been, louder than any machine, louder than anything I'd ever heard before in my life. Or we'd sit together in the same position on the two-seater on the back porch, from where we liked to watch the sunset. Sometimes we linked arms or clasped hands. At such moments, I felt that she was as much a comfort to me as I was meant to be to her. Every now and then, she would squeeze my hand without saying anything, without needing to say anything, but it was as if she had squeezed my heart. Golden hour, magic hour, evenings when the beauty of the changing sky made us both go still and dreamy. Sunlight falling at an angle across the lawn so that it touched our elevated feet, then moved up our bodies like a long, slow blessing. And I found myself a breath away from believing that everything was as it should be. See the moon, count the stars. There all the time without you and ever shall be, world without end. Joyce. Infinitely rich, infinitely beautiful. Everything was going to be all right. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. What a beautiful passage. Gives us all a little comfort at this moment, this crazy moment. Thank you, Sigrid. And now I'd like to introduce Jasminne Mendez. Just say a word about our interviewer, a wonderful interviewer. Jasminne is author of the memoir Island of Dreams, winner of an International Latino Book Award, and Night Blooming Jasmine, Essays and Poetry. Her debut children's book, Josefina's Habichuelas, is coming out in 2021. Jasminne, Julia, Sigrid, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rich. And thank you, Sigrid and Julia, for that wonderful, wonderful reading, both of you, and for your books out in the world now. So we greatly appreciate you and your time and your words, not just these new books, but all of your work, your collections of work, I'm sure have inspired many, as they have inspired and touched me in many ways. Before I jump into questions, I want to honor what we're all going through. And just ask you, how are you during all of this, putting out a book, promoting and sharing, and maybe creating or not creating during these wild times. How are you, Sigrid?
I'm all right. I mean, I feel like I'm going through the same thing that everyone, else is going through. I mean, it's the anxiety is, it doesn't seem to go away, and it's not like it's one thing. It's like we have these rolling crises that are happening. For a while, when everything began in spring, I had a lot of trouble reading. I couldn't read at all, but that came back, thank goodness. But I haven't been able to write, which I think is fine for the moment, because I think there's really too much going on, and I want to be writing, but it doesn't. On the one hand, it doesn't. It's almost, it feels impossible not to write about it, but on the other hand, it feels too soon to be writing about it. So everything is changing, and we're all changing, and I feel like, until I get some sense of what that change really is, I'm not going to be able to write. So, and that's a new kind of experience. I mean, this really is a very unusual moment, not like other writer's block or difficulties that I've had. We'll see. We'll see. That's all we can do. All we can do is say we'll see, and let's hope. Let's hope we get to the other side of this terrible time.
First off, I want to apologize. Rich knows I had to call him because you all went away. So I didn't hear, Sigrid, your reading until the very end, or your introduction or whatever. But I'm back. And this question, I can't agree more with you, Sigrid. And it is such a comfort to hear from other people that it is difficult for them. People say, oh, all this, time, you're reclusive, you can write. No way. I think that part of what we do as writers is that, as I said, even before the pandemic, I was picking up some zeitgeist about these elegiac times, broken times we were living in, which the pandemic has only fully blown in our faces. And I just feel like we're living in a deeply mythic and scary moment. We need to not let this moment be lost on us. We need to pay attention. We need to integrate it, because as writers, we weave stories out of these moments. And how can we do that when we haven't even integrated it or understood it? So I think it's a time to maybe listen on all kinds of levels, listen to voices that are coming forward that maybe have not been heard before, listen to everything going on around us. And it's hard because, Sigrid, you can probably talk about this too. Writing has always been a way of making meaning and moving through experience. Yeah. So when it's not possible, it's difficult. But that's what it is. And this moment we're going through together.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say
Jasminne?
you talk. Thank you for asking. Yeah, it ebbs and flows. There are moments when I've been writing a lot, but not at all about the times. It's sort of, I'm writing YA and going back into my high school youth days, and as escapism, right? I don't even really write fiction, but I've been sort of escaping into that world and allowing myself to fail miserably. But yeah, and then times where I just binge watch TV because I can't do anything else, So yeah, it's been okay. It's been a rough couple of weeks. And actually, I was going to say that reading both of your books during this time, as I had personal family members dealing with COVID, was quite difficult. As both of your main characters are facing losses and grief. And so I just wanted you to both sort of speak on that a little bit with regard to what do you think your books or your characters have to say about grief or grieving, and how they sort of approach that, or losses, right? Maybe not even necessarily grief, but loss. Yeah, if you just want to talk a little bit about that.
Should I? You want me to speak first? I don't know. That's such a big question. I mean, in a way, the book exists to answer that question. You know, I wanted to write. I mean, for me, I had already written one book that was about, you know, losing someone very close to the narrator, and in that case, it was a suicide. The person did not leave a note. It was unexpected. It was very, very difficult to go through that period of grief. And in the new book, there's somebody who's dying. The narrator has a friend who's dying and thinking of taking her own life, just because she doesn't want to, because she knows there's no hope, and she doesn't want to go through all this suffering if she's going to die anyway. So that's why that's on her mind. So in this case, it's like the narrator is going through a period of grief before, and being very close to it. But you know, it's what I wanted to explore in this book, among other things, was how this person agrees to do this, to this extraordinary request by an old friend. Would you be with me during this time? And goes through all kinds of things, like says yes, first of all, because she doesn't know how to say no. Then when she's actually with the woman, she's telling herself that it's not really going to happen, so she's in denial. And then, you know, time passes, and these women become closer and closer to each other. And in the end, you know, the narrator feels that it's a privilege to be there and share this with another person. And she's aware of having a very profound and intense experience that she would never have wanted to miss. And that's why she ends up thinking, this has been both the saddest time, and at one of the saddest times, and one of the happiest times of my life. So, you know, I mean, grief and loss and mourning, and people making decisions about whether or not to take their own lives. I mean, it's all very complicated, but it's also so ordinary. I mean, it is an everyday thing, and it's the thing that really unites us. Everybody dies. It's something that we share. Everybody loses other people. But rather than really sharing it, very often what happens is that we otherize the dying person. And that was something else I wanted to look at. So those are some thoughts.
Well, I think it always throws me a little bit when I'm asked what I meant to say, or something about loss or whatever, because I think the story is what is the same. And, you know, it's all the complications that, and all the strategies that one brings to bear when one feels like one's life has fallen apart. And so I wanted to explore that on a personal level with what happens to Antonia, but then, you know, with what shows up at her door, because life also doesn't give you, you know, kind of an excuse. You're going through grief. You've gone through a huge loss. You can take some time out. You know, you're in duelo, as we say in Spanish. You know, you're in pain, and we honor that. No, you know, things happen in Antonia's life. And so I think I wanted to show both the loss and how life doesn't allow us to stop there, even when we need to. And I don't have an answer to what it is. That's what I love about stories, that you don't flatten it. You don't have you know, sometimes when you go before an English class, then they say, well, what's the message? And I think, oh my gosh, you know, what's the message? It's the whole messy story. But I did want to accompany a character through that moment, which I think very much, Sigrid, is what your character is doing, the protagonist, with her friend. You know, you can't save her. You can't do, you know, all you can do is accompanying, but that's huge. And I feel so grateful when a reader accompanies my characters and doesn't try to extract something other than that difficult accompanying through a story, which hopefully, you know, is something that gives solace, as we do give to each other just by being, you know, together. And I always say that readers are a little bit prepared for this moment, because reading has always been about being together apart. You know, you're with Emily Dickinson, but where is Emily Dickinson? Or you're with this character or that, you know. So it is very much the story itself that is the experience.
Yeah, no, and I love that you said that with being together and you know, but being apart as well. And I think that your main character, and Antonia, sort of struggles with that, right? She does listen and she is there, but sort of unwittingly at first, and sort of throughout the whole book, she's kind of like, I just want to grieve. Can y'all just, you know, sort of leave me alone and let me to grieving my spouse? Whereas I think, you know, Sigrid's main character is definitely is there, is present. You know, people tell her their stories. She sort of just listens and absorbs them, and is also sort of internally commenting on them. But I just like to hear sort of your, you know, sort of what led to these choices, right, with these different characters, with regard to, right, like her desire to maybe not want to necessarily take on other people's burdens or problems right away, but still just kind of giving in and doing so.
Well, I think what we see in Antonia is someone with a strategy of holding it together. You know, she's alone. She doesn't have children. She's just trying to carefully manage, and not let anything in that's going to throw her overboard. So I think it's that strategy, and also the strategies that, you know, sort of professional handicap of always thinking that the beautiful literature, that the meaning that it makes, that she can call on that as her string through the labyrinth. But part of it is a chastening, that sometimes, you know, life requires more of us than just, you know, our art and our beautiful words, because she can't stay within that. So she's a reluctant activist. She's a reluctant, and yet she's porous. And, you know, that's part of the strength. That's why she has to, you know, fortify, because she's, you know, she can't sort of keep it out. She's not, you know, I'd much rather her be a nicer or fuller or more, I don't know, brave person, but she's not.
And Sigrid, how do you see your main character in relation to that, right? If you know,
I see real similarities there, because you know, my character is somebody who is telling us about people going through various things and how they have told her their stories. Often they're very sad stories, but she never has. I mean, she doesn't have anything to tell these people. She sort of gets trapped. She's in the locker room, and a woman starts talking about how upset she is because she can't lose the weight, and she's losing her looks, and she's there, but she's very passive. She's not really helpful in any way. And she notes all these times that these things happen, but she is kind of incompetent in my view. She just until she then ends up in this situation where it's so, you know, they're in kind of lockdown together. They're in quarantine, these two women, and where it occurs to her, the experience that she's having, that watching someone die has the same kind of intensity as falling in love. And then things that, that she has so many thoughts and feelings in this relationship with this woman while this is going on. That's one thing, but she is also, I have used that word, reluctant. She's reluctant in all these things. She's a reluctant listener, reluctant activist in a certain way. She ends up, doing the right thing. And also, I think there are real similarities in that these two women, I mean, the woman who's dying, she has a plan. She's going to be in control of her death, and it's going to be peaceful and orderly and clean and neat, and she's going to be as little trouble to. That just, when you're dying, you're still living. It's not death yet; it's life, and where there's life, there's mess. And so very similarly, with Antonia, you have the life goes on and life interrupts, and you have some kind of mess that you have to take care of just because this other enormous thing is happening. Like life, life just, the messy things just keep happening as well, and somebody has to take care of them. So I think there are really very big similarities there.
Yeah,
and bathtubs will flood. The bathtub will flood, and
Exactly.
I should say, I think with both our novels that, if anyone listening say, wow, that's pretty grim. But I think I love the sense of humor in your novel, Sigrid. I mean, it's just funny in so many ways, so many things, so many discrepancies, so many, a woman, and at the same time, so many insightful moments. The woman at the gym complaining that now the men are all looking over her shoulder at the new arrivals in the field of time, and she used to be a beauty, and the poor narrator is trapped there, and so I think there's a lot of that's also life in the midst of dying, that it's funny, it's crazy, it's messy, and that those discrepancies are also make us laugh, even as we're very sad.
Well, we've noticed that with the pandemic. I mean, that started when it did, and then lockdown happened, and your inbox was full of humor. I mean, how many funny things have come out of the pandemic? I mean, there are so many jokes there. I mean, there've been, comic routines, everything, all these things. I mean, I think I remember the first one was the Quarantini, the drink. That I seem to remember that was the first one. Then that became, everyone heard that. But when I first heard it, I thought it was very original and funny. And somebody sent it with a little picture of a martini and make mine a double, and it just went on from there. It was just, all kinds of extremely funny things. There was the woman who had heard that you could use a bra to make a mask. This was before it was so easy to get masks. And then the next thing she said, and I want to show you what happened. And the next thing she shows with the cup that covers her entire. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, there was so much. So there you go. Because the thing is that humor, comedy is part of human experience, part of almost everything that happens. And if you don't put it in there, you feel like something essential has been left out. Plus, as Julia was saying, if you have all these, if you're writing about things that are very sad, it would be very, you have to think of the reader. I mean, it would be very grim for the reader just to be, reading something that was that heavy from beginning to end without any touch of lightness. And also, some of the very sad things I have in my book the reader knows. I don't, like things that I have about climate grief and very bad things that are happening out in the world. The reader doesn't need me to tell them. I mean, that as well. There are all kinds of places where you can get that information. So you need to, you want to give the reader something that they can't find on CNN or social media or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and Julia, I also found like your sisters, right? There was also moments of humor and lightness in that relationship and in sort of their quirks, which then turn darker, right? As the novel progresses. And I know that that sisterhood is definitely a theme throughout most of your books. And so can you sort of speak a little bit on creating that dynamic between the sisters? I will say, as a fellow Dominicana, I was slightly triggered at times by the tias. I just think of my tias and like my mom and their all relationship. And I'm like, oh my God, these are my mom and her sisters. What is happening? And so that sort of codependency enabling, but also devotion and love and that duty, right, to each other. So you just talk a little bit about crafting that relationship between those sisters.
Well, it's complicated. It's not, they bring up reverentially the sisterhood, but it's complicated. It's not easy, and all kinds of things happen. And I think part of what Sigrid, you were saying is that you don't want a novel all in the same register. It's got to have a rhythm and the humor, and the lightness. So, I came up with that phrase, but it is true. I wanted kind of a contemporary book of Job with a sense of humor. And part of the reason that it can be humorous is instead of an old patriarch, you have a Latina Greek chorus, and the sisterhood and their different approaches and the craziness and the roles and the, in the midst of all that's going on, the bickering and yet, kind of a deep bond that keeps throwing you back together. So I think, sisterhood, I mean, we come from cultures where it's always been about a we, and you're all thrown in together. And the only way you have a little wedge of individuality is you get these labels, which constrain you. She's the selfish one. She's the creative one. She's the mean one. She's the saintly one. And you just so that too, I wanted them to be complex because I didn't want the flattening that sometimes happens when, Latina characters, older ones especially, they're like the abuelita or the curandera. Hell no, these are complicated, crazed, mixed, hybrid people. And, I wanted to be accurate rather than,
Stereotypes.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
stereotypes.
and I definitely felt that about both of the characters, many of the characters, the female characters in both of your books, and the fact that they do sort of defy what we think of, and I'm quoting from Sigrid's book, women of a certain age, right? And I was really I loved it. I mean, I just was like, they're not sort of the grandmotherly type that are ready to bake cookies and do all these things that everyone sort of seems to assume that comes after a certain age, and they are still obviously dealing with the world and living in it and trying to navigate it during these sort of very political times. And so I know that both of these books are written sort of in response, right, to perhaps the last 4 years or even at times before that. And they speak so timely to what we're living through now. And so I'm just wondering if you, if you've had any pushback or anyone sort of come at you for the political views, if you will, presented in your work, this work in particular. I know obviously, Julia, you have in the past, but for this work in particular.
Are you asking me, Jasmine? Yeah. Well,
Yes.
my editor and agent will tell you, I don't read reviews, and I can have the excuse that I'm on a dirt road in Vermont. But I could go online and find out. I just find it so disheartening sometimes, and I am I tune in when I hear things, and then it just messes up my stuff. And I can read the reviews later or the responses later, but I just find that it's there, you know, with the internet and this whole interconnected world, so many good things about it now, keeping us all connected in many ways now, but it's also crazy. And I think part of what for me is the craziest is in your very instrument that you use to write lies your distraction. You know, it's like if Yo-Yo Man's cello suddenly flashed a little icon, you've got an email, you've got a message, boom, you know, it's insidious. And I just find there's too much out there. And it's very distracting. So I just, you know, I'm sure I just heard from a friend who had a book come out, and she's very upset and bruised because of the bashing and stuff like that it incited. And I just told her, turn it off. You know, I mean, we have to pay attention, but we don't have to pay attention to our own faces in the mirror and what people are responding to us. You know, you do the best work you can with your whatever talent, craft, experience you've had, and then it was the best you could do. You know, I don't know, Sigrid, what do you think?
I think that was all really very, very well put. I don't know that I would. I mean, I agree completely with you. I haven't, you know, I haven't had with this book any particular kind of, you know, pushback about any opinions or politics in it. But I agree. You have to tune a certain amount out. I mean, it's such a barrage that we have, and it all happens like in the moment. You know, it's like you know, there's not a lot of there's not any kind of lag time. I mean, suddenly everything, people are all worked up, and comments are flying and whatever, and yeah, it can be worse than distracting. It can be very destructive. But I think yeah, I mean, on the other hand, when you think about criticism, though, you think about people attacking your book, or, you know, giving you terrible reviews, panning you, or you know, or really being extremely harsh. You know, I remember someone had said to me a very long time ago that if you aren't getting any bad reviews, if no one is attacking you, you probably aren't doing your job. And that, you know, there is some truth to that. No, I mean, that not that I want to invite it, but I'm just saying that, or what did Oscar Wilde say when the critics are in disagreement with one another, then the artist is in harmony with himself, or something like that, or you know. So,
That's
Well,
great. Thank you.
oh, sorry, Jasmine. I keep with
No.
with the lag. No, just thinking that you know, this world we live in is such a reactive format. You know, the internet, and many times I know with myself, my instant reaction isn't the one to be trusted. And one of my great discoveries is that there's a draft folder on your inbox. And when
right.
you respond, you put it in the draft folder and you wait 24 hours. And usually you just delete it or really revise it. So, but it is such a reactive form, and people are putting stuff out there that they can't take back later. And if you enter that fray, it's just, you know, it's just not a productive or responsible way to respond. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you both. I would love to continue this conversation, but unfortunately we have to pause for now. And I just enjoyed both of your readings and enjoyed speaking with both of you this evening. your work has always been an inspiration to me as a budding writer, if you will. And so I thank you. And both of these are very timely novels for what we're all experiencing and have been experiencing the last few years. And so I encourage and urge everyone to pick up Afterlife by Julia Alvarez and What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunez, because they're wonderful, wonderful works of art that are very timely and necessary right now. So thank you both. I will hand it over to Rich, I believe.
And thank you,
Yeah,
Jasminne.
thank you.
Thank you, Jasminne.
Yes.
And thank you, Jasminne. Yes, I agree. Thank you all. That was a beautiful conversation. I only wish it could have gone on, but alas, it's the end of our hour. It was a great honor to have you with us tonight. And thanks for the gift of these wonderful books. I can't agree with Jasminne more. I think they're timely, and the books have a kinship too. So thanks. And if you're going to buy them, don't forget brazosbookstore.com. Your discount code is Inprint. Now, we hope you'll be with us all year for this series, and stay tuned for further info to imprinthouston.org, where you can join the Inprint email list, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Speaking of the evil internet, and I couldn't agree more. Good to take breaks. Thanks again. Hope to see you here in the virtual studio in 2 weeks for a very special evening with Britt Bennett. In the meantime, take care, be well, and happy reading.